All right, cheers, everybody. Got a little bourbon going for you tonight. And welcome to the Behind the Point Spread. Happy Wednesday. My name is Travis Justice. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Travis Creates. If you're watching on YouTube right now, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button because we like to have a lot of people subscribe to the Doc Talk Sports channel. And the more people have subscribed, of course, you can be alerted whenever our content comes out, and you'll know when the podcast comes out, the Dog's Diagnosis. If you haven't listened to this week's podcast, just go check it out with me and Dr. Rob Zadiska. But this night is about betting. It's about point spreads. It's about having fun with three dudes. Bringing in Dr. Rob Zadiska and Scott Spreitzer. What's going on, guys?
Travis, rather. Sorry, I like Scott too, but Travis, what are you drinking?
I am drinking Kirkland bourbon tonight. And so we go to the Costco and we get the Kirkland bourbon. That's like your everyday bourbon, right? I'm not going to pour Blanton's tonight. I'm not going to pour Basil Hayden's. You guys are special enough that you get the Kirkland bourbon.
Damn, high top shelf right there.
Well, I'm celebrating. I hit the 42-pound mark today, and so you know this, Rob. I haven't been drinking very much, and so I'm down 42 pounds since May. So
where did you start at?
I started at about 246.
Wow.
So yeah. So it's
you're almost an even two bills.
Yeah. So I weighed at 2034 today is what I weighed in at. Yeah.
Impressive. That's discipline.
And Rob's been with me. Rob's been with me during this journey. He knows I've been pretty disciplined to it.
That was like end of wrestling season my freshman year, like end of season weight was 205.
Damn. Scott, what's the heaviest you've ever been?
246, 247, right around there.
Yeah. Rob, what's the heavy in your playing days? What was your weight?
Heaviest off-season weight I ever got. Man, we're talking biscuit shy of about 340.
Wow.
I would go through the off season around 335 was kind of my average, and then you'd really pick up the cardio like before the season started, and I'd cut down to like 330, 325 going into training camp. And I'd usually hold pretty good. I wouldn't lose it. This was back in the day when it was 2-a-day training camps, and it was like 5 hours total practice time, and late July, like late July, that kind of thing. And so it was pretty brutal. So you really had to be in good shape. But I would go into training camp weighing 327, and at the end of training camp, I'd weigh 325.
Okay.
So, yeah, what are you 6'5", Rob? About 6'5"?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. I was gonna say I go about 6'1". Travis, you're about what, 6'1"?
No, hold on. No, I'm not 6'1". I wish I was 6'1".
I used to be 6'1".
My driver's license says 6 foot, which really means I'm about 5'11" and 3/4. I've never been over that. My daughter Abigail is taller than I am. She's 6 feet tall, 6'1", and then Owen's probably about 6 feet and a half, 6'1".
Which I will say, in all honesty, the last time I literally did the whole like hips, shoulder blades, back of the head against a wall, heels together, stand up straight, have somebody ruler across the top of the head, like everything correct. We're trying to get accurate here. I was 6'4" and 3/4.
See, you always round up, man. I'll give you 6'5".
3/4. You can round up 3/4. So like
absolutely
6'4" and a half. Technically, you can round up. Like 0.5 is a round up.
Yes,
I'm 6'4" and 3/4. So I think it's a pretty. It's at worst acceptable to say I'm 6'5".
I started going to a new doctor right after like the lockdown. And I'd been going to the same doctor for about 10 years, and I got doctor 5-minute drive away from me. Wife was going to her, and I thought I'd go to her. And she clocked me at 6 feet. And I stopped going back to my other doctor. And I swear to God, I went back to my other doctor.
I'm going to you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to retire from anesthesia. I'm going to open a primary care clinic, and I'm going to turn I'm going to turn all of my patients like on paper. It's going to be like a college volleyball program. Everybody's getting 2 extra inches in height, and they're losing 25 pounds of weight on paper. Like I'm gonna have the happiest clientele ever.
The hard thing right now is I'm about 233, 234, and I really want to be about 210 and have a wiggle room of about 5 to 7 pounds there. You gain a little bit one week, you lose it. I'm telling you, man, I got from 246 down to 233-ish, and it's hard nowadays to drop any more than that. And I'm not working out every day or running or anything like that. Haven't been able to for a couple of months with a bad ankle. But, man, it's like, tried to get below 230, Travis. It's like, salute you, man. That's impressive stuff.
Cocaine, it's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, it is.
Right
meth does amazing things. If you got a bad ankle, though, Scott, Rob, what shoes should he be wearing? What shoes should Scott be wearing?
Dude, when I broke my ankle, best shoes ever, G-Defy, baby.
G-Defys.
All right, I'm gonna check into this.
I'm a believer, Scott. It was for real. So I broke my ankle. I was hobbling around, and I was wearing Hokas, which are great shoes. I'm not gonna downplay the Hokas here, but I was wearing the Hokas, and it was kind of one of those where just ankles just not getting better. I really had a lot of limitations in terms of like how long you could walk, how long you could go and be on your feet. And then I got my first pair of those G-Defys when Travis and I signed on to work with them. And Augustana's football team was playing. They were the spring game opponent for Northwest Missouri State.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went down there. So I spent an entire Saturday hoofing it all over the Bearcat campus, doing that, walking all over a football field all afternoon. And it wasn't until like late that evening, got in the car, I'm driving back up to Omaha from Maryville, Missouri. And I'm like, God, my ankle feels great. And I was like, holy crap, it's the new shoes. It was the G-Defys. I'm like, after that, I've been
Gia or GA5?
GDEFY. So if you go to gravitydefier.com, use the promo code DocTalk20 and get $20 off your order of $100 or more. So that
I'm using the code. I just wrote it down.
Scott, here's the thing. Money back guarantee. What is it, Travis?
60 days. 60 days. If you don't like them, send them back.
You can wear them. Wear them for 2 months. If you're like, I don't like these after 2 months.
I go through most of my shoes in less time than that, so that's no problem at all to give it 60 days.
Yeah. But, they'll pay you back. They'll give you your money back. It's amazing.
7 weeks ago today, I injured my ankle, and last night was the first time I walked down my stairs at my house from second floor to first floor, one step at a time. That's the first time I've been able to do that and put my weight on my left ankle. It's crazy.
I'm laughing because I was in the same boat after hurting mine. It's for real. I'll tell you what, haven't found a cure for the common birthday yet. This whole getting old thing's a bitch.
No kidding. Of course, people are tuning in tonight as we talk about football. And it's one of those things, guys, where, last week we had a lot of good marquee matchups. There's nothing sexy this week, Scott. Nothing sexy at all.
Nope. I mean, you got one game, Bama, Wisconsin. And outside of that, there's just no real marquee I mean, listen, I thought BC, which we're going to talk about today, I thought BC would be a pretty good football team this year. Played Missouri over their wins total. Can tell you why when we get to that game. Thought BC would be a decent opponent. But here we are, 3 months ago, would you really talked about that the best top 25 matchup in college football would be Boston College, Missouri? Maybe Missouri against somebody, but BC wasn't in most people's mix. O'Brien doing a great job. So, yeah, I mean, we want to talk about games we like, but we also want to talk about these marquee matchups because they mean so much to the playoffs and all that down the road. But, man, it was tough to it was really tough to find anything. I mean, it really was this week. So this is – I like to call this a handicapper's delight because this is when you really find the value on what I like to call under the radar games.
So if you want to work with Scott, by the way, you can text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott. Or you can visit docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left side of the website. These are the games we're going to be talking about tonight. We got one in the National Football League, the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Then we're going to move on to the SEC, where we have Boston College taking on Missouri. Scott just kind of touched on that a little bit. We'll move on to the Alabama-Wisconsin game, and we'll wrap up with UNI and Nebraska. We also might have a little bonus in there as well, just to let you know. This is a call-in show, meaning if you have a call for Dr. Rob Zadiska, a question, or if you have a betting question for Scott Spreitzer, you can just give us a call at 402-543-5556. That's 402-543-5556. We don't have a phone screener tonight, so if you do call, you're going to be prompted by a computer, just to let you know. You can leave your name in there and stuff like that. Owen's at a concert tonight. He ditched us, guys, so
Is he performing the concert, or is he at the concert?
No, he's down at the, he's really good that he supports the other musicians that kind of helped get him started. And so his buddy Ryan Osbar is opening up for somebody at the Slowdown tonight. So Owen tries to go when people who helped him are playing, he tries to go support, which I think is pretty cool, right? Yeah. I mean, you're giving a little support whenever you can. So, Rob, before we dive in, because people are going to start freaking out. I mean, they are. They're going to start freaking out. They're going, why are you wearing an Arizona State shirt? Why do you say you go Sun Devil volleyball? Explain to everybody why you're wearing an Arizona State volleyball shirt real quick.
So my brother John, former Husker, his daughter is the libero for the Arizona State Sun Devils. And they are actually playing in Lincoln. So it's a 4-team. I got to double check the teams, but it's I think it's a 4-team, one of those little mini tournaments that they're having in Lincoln this weekend. And so I think I'm blanking on the 4th team, but it's Nebraska, Arizona State, Long Beach, and there's a 4th team in there. But anyway, so I'm going to be going down, going to be hanging out at the Devaney Center, watching Arizona State play Long Beach on Thursday and Nebraska on Friday. So it is going to be a volleyball packed couple of days here. It's going to be awesome. So I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to a Nebraska volleyball match at the Devaney Center.
Okay.
So when I was in school, you'd go over when they were at the Coliseum still. And so this is going to be kind of an experience for me. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you can give your full review on the podcast that we'll record coming up this weekend. All right, let's dive into the game tonight. Let's start with the National Football League. Cincinnati's going to be at Kansas City, a Sunday game at 3:25 on CBS. Kansas City, a 6-point favorite, over under at 47.5. Of course, the Chiefs just got by last week against Baltimore.
Yep.
What do you see this game like, Scott?
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty dominant effort for the most part by the KC offensive line. I thought Lamar was so into I've got to beat the Chiefs because he was 1-4 going into that game against them that he probably ran the ball. Looking back at game film, he probably ran the ball more than he would have liked to tell you the truth. That's my thought, at least my opinion on it. He ran the ball too much, and he also took too many hits. Wasn't at practice at Monday, by the way, so we're not talking about Baltimore this week, but just a little heads up. Supposed to be fine. John Harbaugh says he's supposed to be fine, but he didn't show to practice on Monday, and that was, 4 days after the game. Anyway, back to the Bengals and Chiefs. It's down to 5.5 now. This just happened in the last couple of hours where it's dropped in just about every book under 6. And basically what happened is a respected group came in and started betting on the Bengals this afternoon. But that line was as low as 3.5 a few weeks ago. And of course, got up to 6, as you mentioned, 6 the last few days, and down to 5.5 right now. This is overreaction week in the NFL. Week 1 to week 2 is the biggest overreaction week by public bettors that you're going to see throughout the course of the season. This team looked great. That team looked horrible. So this team's going to continue to be a Super Bowl contender. This team's going to go 0-17. It's just that's the kind of mindset of the public. And the problem is with Cincy. I mean, we all say, wow, how in the world did they lose that game last week as more than a touchdown favorite to the Pats? But it's hard to jump on Cincy in the first 2 weeks of the season. I was, going through all the numbers, and this is the 6th season now for Zach Taylor on the sideline. And through last week, he's 1-10 in the first 2 weeks of the season. And then the team cuts loose. Now, on the flip side, Andy Reid with the Chiefs, 34-11 when it comes to the first month of the season with Kansas City. And the funny thing about it is KC, when you look at the average margin of victory in those 45 games, it's about 6 points. The Bengals, 1-10, average margin in those games, minus 6 points per game. So it's right there where the line is, but it is tough to back Cincy here. And I get why people are doing it. They had a 3.5-point spread not too long ago. But I look at what they did. They had 74 yards rushing last week against New England, 164 yards passing. That's it. 5.6 yards per pass. This team's really got to find somebody to take the position of Joe Mixon's departure. They miss him big time in that offensive backfield and the things he can do. I believe they will. What I've already played and what I think is a good play here for folks if they want to jump into this game is a prop, Isaiah Pacheco. I've got him over 63.5 yards rushing for KC. They've got one of the top interior offensive lines, as we know. Cincy right now is an interior offensive line that is not that good, and I think that Pacheco is going to get a lot more carries. I think he had 15 last week. If he gets less than 20, I'll be shocked in this particular game. So that's the play for me. Pacheco over 63.5 rushing yards. I looked at Cincinnati's schedule the rest of the way. Even if they would lose here, I think they'll be 5-2 when they face Philly on October 27th. That's a home game. And I still think this team can win 11 games, even if they start 0-2 when I looked at their schedule. But they've got to shore up those two things. Interior defensive line, find somebody who can take the place of what Joe Mixon meant to this team.
So staying away from the game as a whole, but playing the prop, right?
Yeah, playing the prop. I don't know that I'll get involved. It's Wednesday night. Maybe I will by Saturday or Sunday. But the prop I've already bet. I've already played over 63.5.
So Game Dog says, don't think the KCO line played that great against Baltimore. KC averaged 3.6 yards per carry. Mahomes sacked 2 times and constantly got rid of the football in quick crossing routes.
I think it's relative to who they played. Really do. There's nothing wrong with what he just said. He's right. But the bottom line is they got to go with what's relative to the team they're playing. And now they're going to face a poor interior defensive line. And it's matchups. I mean, Casey's good in the interior since he's not too hot in the interior on defense. And that's why they'll be able to push him off the ball a little bit.
Hey, Rob, just to let you know, Dan says Wichita State is the 4th team in the volleyball.
Oh, good deal.
Quad.
Thank you. Much
So
appreciated.
You know what?
There's kind of been some interesting volleyball teams in Lincoln because we had Montana State in this past week, which actually has a couple of Nebraska natives on the roster.
By the way,
So-
and all these comments are just a reminder that we have the smartest listeners around. That's why they disagree with me like half the time and tell me how stupid I am, which I'm totally fine with, right? But they usually correct me.
How can you say you're stupid? You're a huge Iowa State fan. That's a good school.
Oh man.
Anyway, hey, the one thing that.
Look, Elijah says, sorry about the Hawkeyes last week, Travis. I made sure to send my Hawkeye neighbor a text as well down here in Dallas, Fort Worth. I love it that we have listeners and viewers from all over the country. I think that's
like that, Elijah, the other one. The one thing I like about what Scott said when he was talking about that Chiefs Baltimore game, the thing that you highlighted right there was the fact talking about Lamar Jackson and the number of times he carried the ball and got hit. If your quarterback's the guy who's running the ball, that's a bad thing. I mean, that's got to affect things in terms of how these games play out statistically over time, that if your quarterback is your leading rusher, that cannot be a good thing.
Any
I lost
comment
there for a second. So
no, he was talking about how he was talking about if Lamar Jackson is your number one rusher, that's not a good thing for any NFL team, right?
Oh, yeah. And I'm sorry, I'll just say, how about the fact that he dropped back 51 times? That's not Baltimore football. 51 dropbacks in that game. And so a bunch of those runs were scrambles, but he also called his own number too much. But when you're Baltimore and you've got Lamar Jackson, you just went out and got a great running back to play in your backfield, one of the best over the last several years in the NFL, and your quarterback drops back 51 times in a close game. I thought it was a weird play calling situation with the Ravens on offense. And again, I thought maybe Lamar just had, and again, we don't know for sure. We'd have to ask him and he'd have to want to be candid. But the bottom line is that Lamar looked like it was like, I've got to beat this team. This is, the next thing I need to do. And he wanted to beat him so bad that he ran the ball too much.
Well, and that's the thing is that we're going.
No. Keep going, Rob. Keep going, Rob. Keep going.
Well, no, I was just going to. I mean, the only thing I was going to add to that was just when you look at the number of times that he dropped back. I mean, I don't know where I was going to go with that.
Right.
It was something. It's just. I mean, you're putting when you got him dropping back 51 times. I mean, that's a lot of wear and tear on a quarterback. And I think if a team's doing that from a play calling standpoint, that's almost moronic. I mean, I hate to say it, that's Nebraska football over the last 7 years or so.
All right, now let's dive into the college game. We're going to just go to the SEC and the ACC showdown. Scott kind of touched upon this at the beginning. Boston College at Missouri. I still have a hard time believing Missouri's like good again. An 11:45 game on the SEC network. Missouri is 17-point favorite. You're over under at 54 here.
I got a buddy who actually played for Mizzou many, many years ago in the 70s, Dave Van Landingham. We called him Van, but anyway, so I'm always hearing about the Missouri Tigers, whether I want to or not. But the bottom line of this game is that I played Missouri over their wins total this year, and the national average for returning college production from the year before is 58%. Missouri was nearly 70% and 80% on offense. And that's something that I think plays into how well Missouri can be this season. You know, I was looking a little bit at what they've done so far. The defense is not as experienced as it was last year. Of course, the secondary needs a little help at times. You worry about that against some of the guys they're going to face, some of the teams. But having said that, who's going to stop this offense? Maybe BC can. Brady Cook, the nation's top receiving core on the side of the Missouri Tigers. Fantastic offensive line, solid ground game. And what matters most in modern college football to me is a team that can pass, block, and throw the football efficiently. Doesn't mean you got to throw it 50 times, but you got to be efficient when you do throw the football, and that's Missouri. They only two teams in the SEC going into this season returned more overall production than Missouri. That was Texas and Texas A&M. They don't play Texas. But the argument against Mizzou, of course, was the defense and the fact that they had a bunch of close wins last year. Doesn't bother me. The schedule's soft this season. The last couple of weeks, I mean, how much can we take from beating Buffalo and Murray State? They slaughtered those teams. They held Buffalo to 9 first downs and 169 yards. They held Murray to 5 first downs and 85 yards. BC's strength is their defense, and they're running the 5th slowest tempo in college football right now. That's Bill O'Brien. Hit them with defense, slow the tempo, the clock moves, and that's why I can't lay it here with Missouri, because I don't think they're going to get as many opportunities as they do in a normal week of football. O'Brien's going to try to slow this to a snail's pace. What I do think can happen here is that game stays under that posted total, and it's kind of getting to that point where it's almost a little bit lower than I'd want to go. But if O'Brien has his way out there, and so far he has, this is going to be a fast-moving game, and I think BC can hang that number. I'm not going to play a side. I may still jump in on the under.
Of course, BC already has the win over Florida State. Florida State, and this isn't on our docket.
Not sure that's something to hang your hat on.
Well,
Like
no,
Murray and Buffalo, or?
I'm gonna go somewhere here because it's not on our game slip tonight. But Scott made a prediction last week that Mike Norvell would get fired like the second week before the season ends. If Florida State loses to Memphis tomorrow, does he get canned? If they start 0-3, do they fire him?
Like loses to his former team?
Yes. Do they fire him if on Saturday if he loses to Memphis?
You're asking me?
I'm asking everybody.
I would say he sticks around for a little bit longer, but boy, my gosh, he's not going to be able to sit down anywhere near the stadium for about a month.
Ooh.
But that seat's going to be awfully hot. That's almost like 50-50. If I put odds on it, probably make it even money.
You know, Rob, the ironic thing about Mike Norvell and Florida State, he's had to switch the roster over, but it reminds me a lot of Scott Frost's conversation in Nebraska, and they're talking culture down there a lot. The culture's just not, and culture's hard to define, but but they're just talking things aren't right there, man.
Which is, it's kind of weird because the last couple of seasons under Norvell, you heard very positive things.
Yeah.
It was really, really good. I mean, I kind of do wonder. I mean, you look at, they brought in, I can't pronounce his last name, DJ at quarterback.
Come on.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was at times a star at an absolute star at Clemson. Had a little bit of a down year 2 years ago, goes to Oregon State. Has a really, really solid year last year at Oregon State. And maybe, I don't know if it was a quality competition thing, but he looked great. He hops back in the portal again, ends up at Florida State. Boy, he's looked not great the last couple of games. I kind of worry that he's sort of like he's sort of a slightly better Jeff Sims, except for Florida State. And I'm thinking about when you told us, when we were talking last year about Nebraska and Jeff Sims, you said there's literally statisticians that are tracking the turnover numbers for Sims, and that he, throughout his career, he was guaranteed, what was it, like 2.2 turnovers a game, no matter what happens, which is essentially an assured loss. DJ's he almost is kind of that same kind of guy where it's one of those, he's going to do some incredibly athletic things, but it's just, he's going to put your team in trouble, and you're going to end up in a bad position.
Let me ask you this, because, we're talking about DJ, and, oh, by the way, when you were saying that about his last name, I thought flashback, Ray Perkins and Donald Igwe, and he used to call him Donald Kicker. That's what I flashed back to. But when DJ was at Oregon State, Jonathan Smith, who's now at Michigan State, he coached him, and what his skills were, coached to his skills better than Norvell has. And what he did is he ran the ball first and foremost. He play action on the early downs, and on a second and short, he would play action. And it was much more along the lines of what makes DJ feel comfortable. And I haven't seen that out of Mike Norvell. So, Jonathan's got to give him credit. He did a better job coaching to his skills.
Well, and there's something to be said for taking a guy and just saying, okay, I got this really, really athletic quarterback. I'm going to fit him into my system and have him do what my system is, as opposed to changing the system a bit to fit that skill set. So, that's kind of a Bill Callahan mentality. Callahan came in and was, I'm gonna take what I got and shove it in. It's like pounding a square peg into a round hole, and sometimes that just doesn't work.
All right, check this out from James. Scott Frost was hired by LA as an analyst, and the Rams lost by 1 score. Coincidence?
That's great.
Okay, that's brutal.
Again, we have the smartest listeners around. Let's an SEC Big Ten matchup. Madison's going to be crazy on Saturday. Absolutely crazy. Madison's a great place to watch a football game. I don't know if this is going to be a good football game. An 11 o'clock game on Fox. Alabama, 16.5-point favorite over the Badgers, over under at 50.5. I tell you what, I'm not sold on Luke Fickell in Madison, and I think this could get out of hand. That's my opinion, Scott.
Well, first of all, that tweet or that message texted in that was just sent is, I've been doing this now for 2 full seasons and 2 weeks of this season. Now 3 weeks. That's my favorite one of all time. So that was great. That cracked me up big time. And it's true on top of it, best kind of comedy. Anyway, Alabama, laying 16.5 here, total 49.5 up in Madison. And I have to ask you guys this. Guess how many true non-conference road games Alabama has played over the last 17 years?
Ooh, true non-conference road games. I'm going to say 2.
Rob?
I'm going to say 6.
You're right in the middle, 4. This will be their 5th true non-conference road game since 2007. They just don't go on the road against non-conference teams. It's been 13 years since they played on the Big Ten road. So, they've avoided the Big Ten going on the road. I watched the game against South Florida last week. Don't want to overreact too much. It was a 1-point game into the fourth quarter. It was 21-16, well into the fourth quarter. And they end up putting up like a 42-16 final. And if you didn't watch the game and weren't paying attention, you would just think it's another typical Alabama win. As far as this game is concerned, I don't know about Phil Longo's offense. He was going to be the savior, with Luke Fickell, to take in this team from the identity that it's had all these years under Barry Alvarez and the coaches that came after him into a quicker paced, we're going to throw the football a little bit more offense under Phil Longo. And it just hasn't happened. Last year, they were 125th in big plays in college football. The running game's okay, but nothing special. They returned all but one up front on defense and got 2 future NFLers at linebacker. They're averaging only about 6 yards per pass. I look at Jalen Milroe for Alabama, and he was downright awful last week against South Florida. The offensive line, by the way, was messy against South Florida. Milroe, if you remember, the top teams that he's played are Georgia, Michigan, and Texas. He was bad against all 3. And I know a lot of quarterbacks are going to look bad against those 3 teams, but with that talent around him that Saban had brought in, plus his coaching, Milroe didn't look good in those games. He didn't look good last week. The best thing about the Badgers right now, to me, is their defense. I think this game's going to stay under the total. I don't think that all of a sudden Tyler Van Dyke is going to catch on and reach that potential Coming out of high school, he gets signed by Miami. They're thinking Heisman Trophy contender. Now he's at Wisconsin. I still don't see things out of Tyler Van Dyke that we thought we were going to by this time in his collegiate career. I think it's an under. I think it's going to be a workmanlike game for Wisconsin, and they might hang that number because of that, but I think the under is the best way to go.
So Game Dog has a question for you. So Scott, I'm seeing 92% of the action on Bama. Do you fade the public on any games that 90+% of the money is on one side?
That's a great question. And one of the things that I look for, I don't want to be on those sides. It just feels so wrong to be on the side of a 90% public bet squad. The problem I have with it, and I talked to a bunch of sportsbook directors in Vegas and outside of Nevada, and it's like you'll hear 92% at one book at Alabama, 75% at another book at Alabama, 70, so you get those different counts. Now, if it's 92% in one book, it means they're getting the majority of the bets everywhere. I try my best to have tunnel vision and ignore all that. But, if you look at the last couple of weeks, when you see one-sided action by the public, those games have lost. And it is something that's really hard to keep from seeping into your mind and your handicapping, because it's been a loser more often than not. Public wins about 50% of the time over the course of 20 years, but you got to hit 52.3% to break even in 11 to win 10 betting. And so I think about that and I think, all right, well, if the public's 90% on one side, there's going to be a new chandelier at the Westgate Superbook next week, for $200,000 because they're going to make a whole lot of money off of the public. So it's tough to give that straightforward, answer on that, because there's times when I really like a team, the public's on them and they cover anyway. There's times when I'm totally against the public and the public covers, so it's tunnel vision, go with what you like, no matter who's on the game, and hope and pray that you're not on a side that's got 90% of the public on it. That's basically what it comes down to.
Okay, it was hard to get a line for this next game, but Scott went ahead and found one, I believe, on FanDuel. Northern Iowa is going to be at Nebraska on Saturday night. Coach Matt Rule talked about how he doesn't like night games, and I don't blame him. He was like kegs and eggs in the morning.
Dude, that's cool. Like the greatest thing ever.
I know. And the fact that he said it just shows you how relatable he is to everybody. I mean, it's like, there's nothing wrong with this guy. He keeps saying the right things. But Scott found a 27.5 point spread for Nebraska, over under at 48.5. Now, listen, I'm Nebraska's going to win this game, right? I mean, we know that. But at the end of the day, I like Mark Farley so much, and they've been able to hang around. Does Nebraska cover here, Scott? Or because I know Nebraska's going to win, but Northern Iowa is a good FCS team. Mark Farley's got a good offense, rebuilding the defense, but he seems to get his teams up to play Division I foes.
And they're not bad. I mean, they're 29th, in voting FCS top 25. They're just, 4 spots out of the top 25. They've beaten St. Thomas. They've beaten Valpo.
How good is St. Thomas, though?
Well, Valpo too.
Because that was a come from behind win.
It was a close, 17-10. I believe they were trailing in the third quarter, if I remember right.
Yeah, they were.
And in fact, it was 10-7 in the fourth quarter, and they get the win. When you look at 2 wins, you're getting it like that. You'll see that the Panthers, they love to run the football. They don't pass the ball well. Nebraska's just got to get over themselves from last week. That was such a game of the year type of atmosphere. And if they can get past that, are they going to be challenged by a one-dimensional football team with talent that's several steps lower than themselves? I don't think so. I've seen this as high as 30 this morning. I saw as high as 30 at a couple of books. And so it's going to go up. It's not going to come down. But I looked at that, they're 54.7% passing and threw just 42 passes in their 2 games thus far. So it really comes down to, can Nebraska just get over what happened last week, refocus? If they go out there and play with 90% of the energy they had last week, they probably win this, 45-10, somewhere in that neighborhood. But real quick about UNI, not you and I, but Northern Iowa, they gave up nearly 6 yards per carry to St. Thomas, their best running back, I should say. And then Valpo's dog meat. I mean, you want to talk about a lousy program. So it's kind of hard to judge. The books are basically saying 38-7. I think 45-7 in that neighborhood, probably.
Let me play devil's advocate. And again, Nebraska's going to win this game. The letdown after the emotional win, but also I think it was Tom Fornelli on CBSSports.com this morning had an article on Nebraska. and said, hey, don't be deceived. There's still some problems, especially offensively. The lack of offensive explosive plays. He kind of went into some stuff that things may not be what they appear. Would you agree with that?
To a certain extent. I thought the offensive line has some work to do after watching them last week.
Hell, Rob just did a whole diagnosis for 2 of them 2 days on how good they were.
Well,
Moving
but
mountains.
okay, again, those were short yardage run plays by design.
Well, those 2 we showed were pretty good. I mean, they were 15.
Yeah, no, and they
runs.
did some good stuff there. And actually on the explosive run plays, I mean, I guess it wasn't a run play, it was a pass, but you look at some of the plays that got called back because of penalties. Nebraska had that long play in the second half that went down to, what was it, the 1 yard line. They got called back on a holding call by Ramir that was the hold was non-existent. And I'm an offensive lineman. We're holding every play. I guess
yes, you are.
Sure.
Thanks for admitting it.
It is. It's. I mean, if you're not holding, you're not trying. That wasn't a hold. So it's. I mean, I guess I'm looking at that. I thought it was just some. I've gone back and I've watched it twice. I'm a little more impressed by Nebraska's offense in the second half than I was when I was watching it live during the game.
You know, I haven't watched your show yet this week, the recap, and I'm going to. Usually I watch it by now, but I'm going to watch it late tonight when I'm done working. And I didn't see the second half, so I got to, put a little caveat or whatever you want to call.
Nothing happened.
I didn't watch
the game. The game was over at halftime, and basically nothing happened in the second.
I did see you on the field though with your 94 mates. I did see you walking around the field before hey, I know that guy.
Meandering. I was meandering across the field. So, hey, we had a comment there that disappeared.
Which one? So this one is from Game Dog again. He said, America Sportsbook over in Council Bluffs has Nebraska at -30.5.
Yeah, you shop around because there you go, 30.5.
Yeah.
I mentioned there's a couple of books offshore that had it at 30, and FanDuel this morning had it at 27.5. They might have gone up, but when the other books had 30, FanDuel was still at 27.5. So depending on who you're playing, shop around.
So Scott, here's a question for you. I can't remember. This might have been last week, might have been the week before, but we talked about how much does like some kind of emotional effect play into this. And I asked you about that in terms of, hey, if you're coming off of a really big win, an emotionally draining loss, something like that, how does that affect next week's score? And you said, at least from a handicapping standpoint, it's something you guys try to really stay away from in terms of how that might affect that.
Yeah, I talked about it. I think I brought up like the sandwich spots that everybody loves.
Yeah.
It's 50, basically. Again, this particular game, if you just handicap the raw aspect of the matchups, Nebraska wins this and covers the spread. They, score at least 45. I still think, again, that Northern Iowa is going to have a real tough time scoring more than a touchdown if Nebraska's focused. So my thought is when I handicap this game, I'm taking all the emotion of the game of the year last week out of the mix. A game in which the crowd and the atmosphere was like nothing in college football I've seen outside of a playoff game or national championship in a long, long time. So there is that thought, that maybe the emotion seeps into it. But as far as I'm concerned, I just think that Nebraska beats them by 38. So I would say lay the points if you had to. And again, trying to keep out the emotional baggage that you can have from the previous week is something I try to do. But it still enters your mind when you're capping. Will they be past that game and that performance? And again, I didn't see the second half. I'll probably watch it tomorrow morning. I'll be watching the second half of that game because everybody said Nebraska probably should have had 42 on the board, but there were so many weird penalties called in the second half.
Dan says, and you may not have this tip of your finger, Scott, but when was the last time Nebraska was this big of a favorite?
Well, they were 27.5, 28 against UTEP in week one, and they covered that number. We talked about this a little bit last week, and I can't remember off the top of my head before that the last time they were a big favorite. But I was looking a couple of weeks ago before UTEP. What's that?
Fordham?
Probably Fordham.
A couple of years ago.
It'd be in the mix. And I was looking back at Nebraska as a favorite of 8, 9 points or more. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but they were 6-12 their previous 18 before UTEP, covering those numbers. So that was a team you didn't want to lay points with. And
so here's
you didn't want to play very often, whether they were laying points or not. But the bottom line was they weren't trustworthy as a decent size favorite. But 27.5 against UTEP, got up to 28.5, came down all the way down to like 26, back up to 27.5, and they covered the number.
Here's the one thing that I've seen this year that I wonder would really, I don't know if this affects point spread or not. UTEP game, we saw it in the Colorado game, especially on defense. Nebraska's gotten some solid leads this year, and they start subbing guys in. They're putting young guys in. The entire backup offensive line was in the third quarter against UTEP. I mean, I haven't seen that in half a dozen years.
Dylan wasn't playing. It was
they were down to they had Gramstad. They were down to the third string quarterback had Gramstad in against UTEP. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I look at, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I feel like Rule is kind of comfortable now at this point in a game where if he's up by 3 scores, he's going to start subbing guys in and try and get some of these young guys, some of these freshmen, some of these sophomore backups, some playing time and start developing guys. And I think that's something that's a good thing in my mind. But I mean, when we talk about what we're talking about tonight, that's like the worst thing you want to see when it comes from for people who are betting point spreads.
Rob, you ought to be a handicapper, because that's a great point that I didn't make, that you have to think about that, because if he's up 31-0, 31-3, 35-6 at the half, how long is he going to leave those guys in there?
And I think
maybe 1 to 2 series of the second half.
Yeah. Well, and I think Rule's at this point now where he's like, okay, we don't have to win pretty. If we're going to win and we're going to win by more than a few scores, let's get guys in there. And like I said, the one thing I know, well, I'm sure there's some coaches out there breaking rules, but I don't think Rule's out there thinking, oh, God, I don't know, we really ought to try and cover the point spread this week.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
If he's up by 3 scores, I think he's throwing backups in there, and all of a sudden that spread's going to be in jeopardy.
You're right. That's the best point we made about this game and handicapping this game. Even better than the emotion of it all and trying to keep away from the emotion was what you just said.
Say, yeah.
If there's the 12-team playoff, you don't need to blow teams out. You don't need to blow teams out.
Yeah, if there's things that are unpredictable, I'm going more with that aspect than I am the emotional aspect about it being a letdown game.
Yep. Hey, Scott, real quick, the Auburn quarterback talked yesterday on a podcast that like bettors when they lose are like going to his Venmo and saying, hey, send me money.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if the guys are joking like that, but see, that's what gives betting a bad name, right? In that, like, you're going to the player asking for money. This looks bad, don't you think?
There's no serious bettor doing that. Not one. I like, just in what I do alone, and I'm, much older than Thorne, the quarterback at Auburn.
Yeah.
So I've got thicker skin. I've been around longer, and I've been doing this forever. The trolls that you get if you lose a game as a handicapper that somebody, bought is through the roof ridiculous. And, be transparent, but yet they will make up numbers that make you look bad in front of everybody. So Thorne's going through that at a young age. It sucks. I hate it. But these aren't serious. This is some Joe jackass who sits in the book while you've got 25.
I like that.
Yeah, you got 20 grand on a game. He's got a $2 parlay with 10 teams on it, and he's screaming and yelling at the screen because 2 of his teams or one of his teams lost, and he lost a whopping $2. I'm getting on there. I'm going to Venmo. Hey, Mr. Thorne, send me. That's the kind of guy who is sending messages to Thorne, in my opinion. It ain't the guy who's going down to the book and people know him and he walks up and they're giving him dinners as he plunks down his 20 dimes. Those guys are totally different people. I can have a losing week. It sucks. You know who it sucks for? It sucks for my clients. I get over it. If I have a losing Saturday, I'm pissed off, obviously. I lost 2 times. I lost money, my own bets and my clients. For myself, okay, great. Tomorrow's Sunday. They play the national anthem tomorrow. I'll be right back at it. I trust what I'm going to do over the course of the season. The clients, first of all, they want to win every day. And it's a little outrageous to think you can, but that's who I feel bad for. It's in your stomach. You're like, son of a bitch. Some guy just worked 60 hours this week and bought my play and I lost. Those are but Thorne's going to learn. Unfortunately, he's having to go through this now with some real, like I said, Joe Jackass wackadoos.
Game Dog says $2 10-team parlay. Seen that before.
I see him every Saturday at the books.
Tiger says Jason Jerkoff or Joey Jabroni. There's some more names that you can use. If you want to be a client of Scott Spreitzer, all you have to do is text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott, or visit docsports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left hand of the website. Now, before we go, and because we do got to wrap it up, because I told Scott, can I have a half hour of your time? We take like 45 minutes every week. Let's give him a bonus real quick, because I actually think this is going to be a good game. Is the UNLV Kansas game? We didn't put that on the board. We probably should have, but is this going to be like 105 to 100? I mean, what's the over on this game?
Set at 58 in most of the books. That was about 2 hours ago. This is looking like an over to me too, Travis. I saw when I said 58. You weren't going to be Joey Jackass for $2. You were running to the window.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll run over to Council Bluffs right now and lay some money on that over.
Yeah, this got bumped from 7 to 7.5 today. Just again, a Wednesday, that happens a lot midweek. A lot of big people who are better start, plunking their money down in the games, and the numbers go back and forth on Wednesday afternoons before we start this show. So it got bumped to 7.5. It's a decent move when you consider key numbers, and 7's a key number. But this line was 11 a week ago. Today, Kansas was an 11-point early line favorite over UNLV. Now you're talking 7. KU had the bad game against Illinois. UNLV hangs 70 on Podunk Tech. And the good thing about UNLV is the previous week, they kicked the crap out of the Houston Cougars in Houston. Never close, 27-7. Houston goes to Norman, Oklahoma, catches Oklahoma off their game and almost beats them last week. So this team is extremely confident. They played Kansas last year in the bowl game, 49-36 KU victory. 85 points on the board. I don't know if we're going to get there, but the only difference that scares me a little bit is it's not Jason Bean. 6 touchdowns last year in that game, 3 picks. So UNLV knows how to get after the pass. But now you've got Daniels. He averaged only 4 yards per attempt last week against Illinois. That worries me a little bit about the over. That's why it's below 60. But I still think this game gets over that total of 58.
Hey, you guys looking for some TV viewing? Do you guys have Apple Plus or Apple TV?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Watch Fat Monkey. It's got to be Fat Monkey on Apple. It stars Vince Vaughn. My wife and I are going to go watch it right now. It's an excellent show. Rob, I think you'd like it a lot.
I got one for you guys.
I'm going to go watch it tonight.
There's a series called Bookie on Max, HBO Max, if you got it.
Called
And
Bookie?
a buddy of mine that I've been lucky enough to get to know over the past decade is Nick Mackay. He's produced 2.5 Men. He's produced King of Queens. And he's got this show called Bookie. And it's
I'm going to check it out.
Dramedy. You'll love it. You'll be laughing your ass off first time.
Dramedy.
Hey, by the way, week number 3, it's our largest live audience yet. So if you're watching right now on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, we're back here every Wednesday at 8 o'clock Central Time. We go till about 8:45 and have a little bit of fun, talk a little football, and talk point spreads. For Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zadiska, I'm Travis Justice. We'll talk to you next week on Behind the Point Spread.